In late August 2025, something happened at Sixth Ward Middle School in Lafourche Parish, Louisiana, that should disturb every parent, every educator, and every person who cares about children's safety. What happened there reveals a crisis that's already happening here, one that most of our institutions are utterly unprepared to handle. We're living through a technological revolution. Artificial intelligence can now do things that seemed impossible just a few years ago. It can write essays, it can create art, it can diagnose diseases, and yes, it can kill cats with driverless cars or even manipulate images with terrifying precision. One of the most disturbing applications of this technology is something called a deepfake. A deepfake is an image, an audio file, or a video that has been altered using AI to depict someone doing or saying something that they never actually did. That technology can take an ordinary photograph, a school picture, a social media post, a yearbook photo, and transform it into something else entirely. Something sexual, humiliating, and something that looks completely real. And here's what you need to understand. These aren't crude Photoshop jobs that anyone can spot. These are images that are so convincing, even experts sometimes struggle to identify them as fake. As one father would later say about an image of his own daughter, you cannot tell the difference. The numbers also tell a chilling story. 96% of all deepfakes online are non-consensual sexual deepfakes. 99% of sexual deepfakes target women and girls. This technology exists and is disproportionately being weaponized to overwhelmingly target women and overwhelmingly for sexual exploitation and shame. But we're not talking about women today. We're talking about children. And before we go any further, I want to give a quick content warning. I'm next going to be discussing a story involving child sexual abuse material, AI-generated exploitative images of minors, and institutional failures to protect a child victim. Please take breaks or take care while consuming this content. This single case captures a larger crisis: deepfake and AI-generated sexual abuse targeting minors and institutions that are wholly unprepared or unwilling to respond in ways that are fair, trauma-informed, and consistent with the law. She was 13 years old. Let me say that again. She was 13 years old. A 13-year-old girl at Sixth Ward Middle School found herself at the center of a nightmare that didn't require a single real explicit photo to destroy her sense of safety. Male classmates allegedly used artificial intelligence to generate extremely explicit nude images of her and other girls. They then circulated those images at school and on the bus. Think about that. Think about being 13 years old and discovering that boys in your class have created pornographic images of your body and are passing them around like trading cards. Think about the humiliation, the violation, the sick feeling of knowing that everyone has seen something that never happened but looks like it did. This is what deepfakes do to children. They take a child's image, a child's face, and their identity, and they sexualize it without consent, without contact, and without any ability for that child to defend themselves. It is a form of sexual abuse, one that leaves no physical evidence on the victim's body. But make no mistake, it is abuse. Law enforcement recognizes it as child sexual abuse material. Experts describe it as exploitation, and yet somehow our institutions don't know how to respond. The girl did what she was supposed to do. She asked for help multiple times throughout the day. She reported what was happening to school staff. She told them about the images. She told them about the harassment. She asked them to make it stop. And then she got back on the bus where those same boys were all still sharing those same images. Imagine that moment. You've asked for help from adults, from authority figures, from people whose job it is to protect you, and nothing changes. You're sent right back into the space where your abuse is continuing. The boys are laughing. The image is being passed around and again. And you're 13 years old and you're alone and nobody is protecting you. She hit one of those boys. And for that single moment of physical reaction after hours of ongoing digital sexual abuse, and she was the one expelled from school. Let me be clear about what happened next, because the injustice of this breathtaking situation, the boy accused of creating and sharing AI-generated pornographic images of her, and at least 7 other female students, he wasn't expelled. He wasn't suspended. He was transferred to another school. The girl who was victimized, who asked for help repeatedly, who finally reacted physically after that help never came, expelled. She was allowed to return only on probation. She was barred from dances, from sports, and other activities until at least January. Her father describes his daughter now depressed, anxious, isolated, feeling like her final year of middle school has now been ruined. And it has been. Not by the images themselves, though those were devastating enough, but by a system that chose to punish her reaction to the abuse rather than the abuser himself. Here's what makes this even more infuriating. Louisiana actually has laws for this. Pretty decent ones. In 2024, Louisiana enacted legislation making it a crime to disseminate or sell AI-generated nude images of another person with the intent to harass, intimidate, or coerce. Violations can lead to fines and up to 6 months in jail. The state also created the offense of unlawful deepfakes, with severe penalties up to 20 or even 30 years in prison in some circumstances for creating or distributing deepfake sexual material, especially when it involves minors. Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office charged 1 male student with 10 counts tied to the unlawful dissemination of AI-created sexual images of minors. Investigators discovered AI-generated nudes of at least 8 female students and 2 adults. And I shouldn't say female, I should say girls. They were children. The sheriff acknowledged that the context of the ongoing harassment, and they acknowledged the school's role, saying the girl would not face criminal charges due to the totality of the circumstances. So let's be clear. The criminal justice system looked at the situation and said, this girl was a victim. We understand why she did that. We understand why she reacted the way she did. But the school district, the institution whose primary job is to educate and protect children, gave her an expulsion record. The law recognizes disseminating AI-generated nude images of minors as a serious enough offense to warrant criminal charges and potentially decades in prison. Yet the school's disciplinary process has, in practice, punished the victim more visibly and more severely than the alleged perpetrator. And this is not an isolated incident. And the Louisiana case is not unique. It's not even unusual anymore. A 2024 study by Thorne found that about 1 in 10 minors know somebody whose image has been turned into a deepfake nude using AI. Think about that statistic, 1 in 10. This isn't a rare occurrence or an edge case. This is becoming normal amongst teenagers, amongst children, globally. About 66% of women report experiencing some form of technologically facilitated gender-based violence, cyber harassment, doxing, image-based sexual abuse. We see this pattern everywhere, from South Korea, where more than 800 deepfake cases were investigated in just the first 9 months of 2024. In international reports describing AI being used to generate deepfake child sexual abuse material and to scale online grooming and blackmail, technology-facilitated gender-based violence, that's the term organizations now use to describe abuse that relies on digital tools like social media, messaging apps, and AI image generators to harass, threaten, extort, or humiliate somebody because of their gender or sexuality. The Louisiana girls' experience fit precisely within the pattern: technology weaponized against girls and institutions responding by disciplining their reactions rather than addressing the underlying violence. The case went public at November 5th, 2025 school board meeting, where the family and their attorneys stood before the community and demanded accountability. What happened at that meeting was both revealing and heartbreaking.
Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on here, I'll be quite frank, is nothing more than disgusting. So here's what we know. We have a kid, undoubtedly, whose images were taken, manipulated, and manufactured of child pornography by a student at that school. The mere allegation alone should be enough to never put them on the same bus that day. She went to you guys. She went to the school. She asked them for help. She was denied. She then asked to talk to her father, to call her father, because she was being made fun of. She was denied. And then they thought it'd be a good idea to put her on the bus. The district attorney here, she didn't find that Ivy was a perpetrator. They declined charges. They will not. They have adamantly said they will never charge that little girl with battery. You know why? Because it's justified. She asked for help, not once, not twice. She is the victim. And now you took her out of school and expelled her? And now her grades have plummeted? You took that from her. It's like every day to be made fun of. Do you know what it's like? This is how kids become suicidal. This right here. And you guys are saying it's okay. Create all the images you want. Tarnish someone's reputation. Destroy them. And when they retaliate, we're going to do nothing to that person. We're going to expel them. We're going to expel the victim, and you can do it again and again and again.
Let that sink in. A father had to stand in front of a school board and beg them to acknowledge what they did to his daughter. And what was the school response? Let's take a look at their statement. The school board is a dedicated mission centered on providing safe, healthy, and nurturing learning environments for all students. We can assure you that all violations of our student code of conduct, including acts of violence and distribution of pornographic material, are immediately and thoroughly investigated and are met with adequate, swift, and consistent consequences. Unfortunately, in this case, there is a tremendous amount of misinformation and omissions of fact that present a one-sided story that fails to illustrate the totality and complex nature of this particular incident and the district's response. Read that again. They call it misinformation, a one-sided story. What's the other side? They say they ensured swift and consistent consequences, but here are the facts that stand out. The family and their attorneys say the student sought help multiple times before the bus incident, yet she ended up back in the same environment where the abuse continued. There's a stark disparity in the consequences. The boy accused of creating and sharing the images was transferred to another school, while the girl carries an expulsion on her record and remains on probation with restricted participation in school life. The mental health impact has been severe. Her father again describes her experiencing depression, anxiety, and a sense of her final year of middle school has been effectively ruined. When victims of digital sexual abuse are punished for how they react under intense stress, especially when institutions fail to stop the abuse quickly, schools send a devastating message. We are more prepared to control your behavior than to protect your dignity.
So what do? That pissant fight that you saw, and she's expelled? That girl did exactly what you're supposed to do, right? Exactly what you're supposed to do. Self-defense has evolved in this world. Now there's a cyber self-defense. So ask yourself, as you do publicly deliberate in your decision, what would you do if that was your kid?
She did what she was supposed to do. She reported it, she asked for help, and she followed the rules. And the system failed her anyway. So I want you to ask yourself something. What would you do if that was your kid? If that was your 13-year-old daughter that came home and told you boys at her school had created pornographic images of her using AI, that she'd reported it to her teachers and to her administrators, that she'd asked for help all day long, and that she was then put right back on the bus where those same boys were still sharing those same images? What would you do? Would you expect your child to just sit there and take it? Would you think it was reasonable for her to be expelled when she finally reacted? Would you accept a school district telling you that there's misinformation about what happened to your daughter? I don't think so. And neither should we. We should not accept it for this girl. Some resources already exist. There are detection tools like Deepfake-O-meter, developed at the University of Buffalo, that allows users to upload images and get an analysis of whether they're likely synthetic. There are training programs to help people spot AI-generated images. There are hotlines like New York State Domestic and Sexual Violence Hotline that support victims of technology-facilitated abuse. But tools and hotlines aren't enough. This case shows us exactly what's missing: clear, understood school policies, specifically addressing AI abuse and deepfakes, not just traditional forms of harassment. Training for administrators, trauma-informed care for teachers on how to recognize technology-facilitated gender-based violence and respond without re-traumatizing the victims. Discipline frameworks that account for context, including ongoing harassment and the psychological impact of synthetic sexual abuse, rather than simply punishing physical reactions in isolation. We need stronger alignment between criminal law, which recognizes AI sexual images of minors as serious offenses, and school discipline, which too often centers the victim's reaction rather than the perpetrator's actions. Her father, Joseph Daniels, has been remarkably measured in his response. Despite everything, he holds no animosity towards the boy or his family. Honestly, I have no ill will towards that young man or his family. He said, kids are kids and they do dumb things just like adults do. So especially at that age, they just don't comprehend the severity of what they do. But he's clear about one thing. I did not approve of her putting her hands on that boy. So the suspension would have been justified in my mind, but expulsion was extremely way overboard. Now, to close this one out, this issue is personal for me. When I was in high school 100 years ago, images of me were used in scenarios that I didn't consent to, even though I wasn't the one doing anything wrong. My face, my identity became a weapon. I learned early on what it feels like when your image is taken out of your control and used to humiliate or harm people. And once you've been a victim of weaponized imagery and a system that repeatedly fails young women and girls, that experience never really leaves you. The shame sticks, even when the moment passes. So when I see this happening to a 13-year-old girl, I don't see a headline. I see a child living through something I recognize in my bones. And in my career, when I've seen deepfakes and non-consensual imagery destroy opportunities for women, when I've sat in meetings with executives and brands, often as the only woman in the room, and heard decision makers say, we won't work with her, I've learned exactly how deep this harm goes. Because when I asked why, the answer was even more disturbing. They pointed to an incident where non-consensual sexual images of a woman were circulated when she was a minor. She was a victim, she was a child, yet her career was being punished years later for her own exploitation. This is the real-world cost of these violations. These images, real or AI generated, don't just cause immediate emotional harm. They follow victims. They show up in boardrooms, hiring meetings, and casting discussions. They shape reputations, careers, and futures long after the original abuse. Women pay the price for crimes committed against them, emotionally, professionally, socially, and it cannot be overstated how damaging that is. Deepfakes aren't just images. They are tools of humiliation. They're tools of control, exclusion, and more. And when we talk about this 13-year-old girl, a child in Louisiana, we're not just talking about one incident. We're talking about a pattern of girls and women punished, formally or informally, for abuse they did not choose. Having sat in those rooms and heard those decisions, I felt a profound sense of responsibility. And that responsibility includes speaking clearly about the real-world impact of those violations. Because that's what they are. They are violations. They are designed to cause shame. They are designed to strip people, especially women and girls, of their power. And we all have a role to play in acknowledging that these crimes committed online can leave very real bruises offline: emotional, professional, social, and sometimes physical. This harm is not abstract. It is not theoretical, and it follows victims well into adulthood, into workplaces, into boardrooms, and into their futures. And if we stay silent, the systems that punish these victims instead of supporting them will stay exactly as they are. So if this matters to you, if you believe children deserve protection, if you believe victims deserve dignity, share this story, subscribe, amplify this message. We cannot let this happen in the dark. We cannot let this child face this alone. She was 13 years old and she deserved better.
Savage girl strutting like a queen, you know she the boss.